first program of the day, featuring CNN News anchor Abby Phillip and Targeted Victory CEO and founder Zach Moffatt, to the stage for a conversation that will set the stage for the next chapter in journalism. Give it up for Abby and Zach.
Breaking news tonight. What was it about this moment that made you feel like this is the time?
It's already very interesting.
She's worked as a White House correspondent and presidential debate moderator. Drew.
Abby Phillips.
No.
Come on, Ken. That is a quintessential question that goes at truth.
Good morning. Thank you, everyone. I'm going to take a quick second just to introduce Abby, only as much as you have a little bit of background before we jump right into the questions. Obviously, Abby anchors NewsNight with Abby Phillips on CNN, where she's been nominated for numerous journalism awards. She's worked with the Washington Post, ABC, and Politico, and has covered many presidential campaigns along with other activities, and now has a new book, which we'll kind of talk about at the end to close. But, where I kind of wanted to start is reading up on you and looking through it. It sounds like you had a different path initially, and then went to Harvard and was going to be pre-med, and then took a little bit of transition. So what got you into journalism? What was kind of that motivating factor? And then when you went into there, what was the driving decisions as you worked through that?
Well, good morning, everybody. Good morning. It's bright and early. It's good to see you all filling this room. Yes, I mean, in short, I, like many other clueless freshmen at 18, thought I was going to be a doctor. Couldn't really hang, but I also, I think, was at that time not really listening to what I was actually good at and what I was actually interested in. I used to, not quite when I was 18, maybe a little bit after that, by my sophomore year, because Politico didn't exist when I was a freshman. By my sophomore year, I used to roll out of bed and open my cell phone and read Playbook. And like a crazy person at 18 years old. And I was like, that's just politics. I didn't really want to be in politics, but I was always interested in political news. And it wasn't until later on when I actually went on a trip to Mississippi and saw all of these locations where some of the most impactful moments in American history happened, where Emmett Till was killed, where Medgar Evers' home, you could literally walk into his home that had been shot up by white supremacists during the Civil Rights Movement, and seeing those places and seeing the impact of journalism on bringing those sights and sounds to Americans, that's what brought me to journalism. But I also think what brought me into journalism was this idea of the immediacy of it. It was interesting to me, even as a relatively young person. Obviously, there was the New York Times and the Washington Post, but I was already, even at that time, much more interested in the sort of 24-hour news cycle, new media phase of things, and it just so turned out that I had an opportunity to work at Politico as my very first job, which I think really opened up the doors for everything that came after it.
Yeah, and that's interesting because you were at Politico when they were really kind of the vanguard of digital media, right? Like the transition. And so they had the resources of a larger news, but they were looking often through the lens of digital. So obviously you took that and learned from that. And so what did you learn from that, and then what were you able to take that to when you went to Moffatt?
It's about responsiveness. I mean, to me, I think even to this day, the thing that legacy news organizations and young reporters and many other people who work in the media right now struggle with is how do you respond quickly enough and adequately to what people are interested in. And one of the things that Politico did so brilliantly was exactly that. If you wanted to know what President Obama said, Politico would probably have it up 5 minutes later, or less, if not immediately. Twitter was really growing in that time as well. And I do think that, media properly serving our audience means that we need to be there when they want us there. Almost in the same way that when people want to know, what's the score of the game, they open their app and they want to see the score of the game. And I don't think that we fully recognize how important that is and how critical that is, increasingly so as we move into the future. But that was true 15 years ago, and it's still true now. And what I learned in that very first job was just how to write 300 words in less than 15 minutes, and just knock it out and get it up there and really distill the gist of it. How to write a headline that catches people's attention, that actually speaks to the question that they are asking, and doesn't try to kind of like self-censor and lawyer ourselves into obscurity. And the immediacy, the pithiness, the directness of the journalism that I learned in that time is still at the core of how I practiced journalism as an anchor, when I was a correspondent at CNN, when I worked at the Washington Post and I was doing digital breaking news there, in all of my different jobs as a journalist.
But it sounds like, I mean, that's a unique skill, and it's a way of approaching it, almost an audience-first approach.
Yes.
And I'm assuming that there was some structural challenges when you're going to institutions that that's not how they think the news should work. Like, what does that look like, the tension, not just from an audience perspective, but you as the producer?
Yeah, I mean, so the thing, doing that at Politico was in a place where that was the expectation. So that was the drive, was to get there. Later on in my career, I worked at the Washington Post, which I absolutely loved. But my first job there was to stand up the dayside breaking news desk at the Post. And this is a legacy news organization where people, that's not really what they did. They were not sort of into the moment-by-moment type of thing. And our job was essentially at the start of every morning to look around the news environment, the internet, the blogs, Reddit. Like, I would check all these different unusual places and find the stories that people were talking about, and then apply the kind of journalism and standards of the Washington Post to those stories, doing our own reporting, digging into that, and get something up on the website before 10 a.m. Sometimes before 9 a.m., sometimes before 8 a.m. And that was, we were just like a little crew doing that at the Post when we started, but it was hugely impactful. We would often have the #1 or #2 or #3 top story read on the website in that time period. And there were people inside the Post and outside of the Post who were like, this isn't real journalism. This isn't serious investigative stuff. And I would always say, look, we have to meet the audience where they are. People are consuming news in all kinds of different forms. It is high, medium, and low. And we as news organizations can't be too good to answer the questions that they're asking about all kinds of different things. And I mean, again, it was not without controversy. I think there were a lot of people who thought it was just a waste of time, it wasn't real journalism, it wasn't serious enough. But we can do both things, and we have to, in order to really meet people where they are. Because if we're not doing that as so-called legacy news outlets, then they're going to get it from places where there are no standards, where there is no process, there is no reporting, there is no fact checking. And I think we can do it better, and when we do it better, the audience responds.
So you take that insight and then you transition from digital and print into verbal and broadcast and cable and a much larger reach. And so I'm sure there's some tension that comes also with you give up some of your anonymity. I'm sure like people see you and they can see you when you're in the process. Was that a hard transition? I mean, when you're looking at that, is that what you thought it would be like to make that transition?
I jumped over the ABC News part of my career, partly because, the lesson that I took from working at ABC News was that there's no way was I going to work in television again. It was not my thing. I wanted to be, I kind of wanted to be anonymous in a way, or at least in the sense that I could just, work on my written craft. I just did not have a huge desire to be on TV. Honestly, sometimes I still don't. The fact that I have to be seen every day is not the reason I do this job. I do this job because when you talk to people on television, the relationship that you have with them is completely different. The way that they take in what you have to say is completely different. I'm always amazed by how much people remember about things that I immediately forget the second that it comes out of my mouth. And I think that that relationship is sacred and it's so important. And that's the reason when CNN offered me an opportunity to come and be a correspondent, I was covering the White House for them when I first got there, that I agreed to do it, not because I wanted to see my face up there every day. It's really not for that reason at all. And it is a completely different animal, but finding ways to, I think it comes back to a lot of the same things that we were talking about, that television as a different medium also has its range, the high, medium, and the low. We do the deep investigative reporting, we do things that are much lighter. We do debate shows like mine, where what I'm doing is creating a platform for other people to talk. And all of those things have value. I think meeting people where they are is so important. And the audience is not a monolith. They want a variety of things from their news. And the thing that they want the most that I've learned in the years that I've been, I think it'll be 8 years soon at CNN, is that more than anything else, I think people are yearning for context. They are getting so much raw information, but they don't know how to process it. And one of the things that we do every night on NewsNight is kind of help in that process, help people unpack the day and really sort through all the various things that happen. And context is almost as important sometimes as just factual, raw information. And sometimes we forget that because we want to create this hierarchy of things. But when you talk to people at home, the people that help them understand the news are just as important in their minds as the people who just tell them what it is.
But I think it's not just you provide context. It seems like disproportionately your show creates sparks of conversation, right? Like it seems like it has this whole, like its second life is almost as big as its first life, and its capacity to reverberate around the internet and drive conversations. I mean, it's a conversation starter in many, many ways, unlike many others.
Yeah, I mean, you know, for good or for bad, I mean, there is a virality to what we do, but I also think that one of the things that we do very well is that we try to find interesting voices, people who have real perspective. We are not trying to just find the median person and have a bunch of median people who have points of view within the same narrow band and put them on television. We really want to show what the range of viewpoints really are in this country, and that is sometimes very provocative, and it is what is interesting to people. That's why things go viral, because sometimes people are hearing for the very first time certain points of view. And I think that has a huge amount of value. You have no idea how siloed the ecosystems are in terms of information. When we break that down, it really creates waves.
No, that's so interesting. So then you take that insight and you've now taken the next step, now you're a published author. So tell us a little bit about the book, the process, but also kind of what the learnings have been, because I'm assuming every year as you work through the book, you see it through a different light and a different lens. It's opening up different apertures of the way to see the current moment, but it rhymes to the past.
Yeah. I mean, in so many ways, this book has been many years in the making for a lot of reasons, but my book is about Jesse Jackson's 1984 and 1988 campaigns. And I think the first thing I'll say is that it's just a piece of history. It's just a project that is about a chapter of American history that I think is still very important, and it becomes more relevant every day. Because the premise of the book is that he had this sort of vision of a kind of, economic populist politics that also had social justice at its center, meaning that people of different races and sexual orientations and socioeconomic backgrounds could come together in a coalition. And that was viewed as radical in the 1980s. And every day I think that we kind of walk into the 2020s, it seems that those themes just keep coming up again and again and again. They come up with people like Bernie Sanders and AOC, and we were talking backstage about Zohran Mamdani, who's become a thing just in the last 6 months. But in a way, in this little microcosm of America here in New York City, Zohran Mamdani is testing a theory that Jesse Jackson put on the agenda back in the 80s. And that theory is there a way to create a populist economic coalition that includes, the Democratic coalition of modern day, which is, Black people, Hispanic people, Asian people, LGBTQ people, women. Can you do that? Maybe you can do it in New York. It's obviously incredibly controversial here, but he's testing a theory that I think very few politicians have been able to execute. And I think the other thing about writing this book and talking to these figures, talking to people like Andrew Young and others who were just, they're such towering figures of American history, civil rights leaders and heroes, honestly, who were around him at that time. It's just a reminder to me that part of what needs to be done in this moment is capturing their memories and their thoughts and their experiences before they're no longer with us, because we are in a generational shift where that generation is leaving us, and I think we have to be kind of proactive about really trying to understand what their contributions were to American history.
Well, unfortunately, that is our time, but thank you so much. That was wonderful, and I hope everyone thank you. Say thank you.
Thank you, Zach.